To start this class about cell respiration, I wanted we start watching this video of your textbook that summarize all the things that we're going to study today. So let's start.
As this mountain biker heads up the trail, the breakfast he ate this morning is being burned to power his bike ride. His breathing rate increases as his leg muscles demand more oxygen to burn more fuel. Let's zoom down to where this fuel is burned, our cells. Here, the blood vessel on the left delivers fuel and oxygen to a single muscle cell. In cellular respiration, energy in fuel is converted to ATP, shown here as starbursts. Most ATP is made in the cell's mitochondria. ATP powers the work of the cell, such as contraction. Let's take a closer look at how ATP is produced from a molecule of glucose, our fuel. Only the carbon skeleton is shown to keep things simple. The first step is called glycolysis, and it takes place outside the mitochondria. To begin the process, some energy has to be invested. Next, the molecule is split in half. Now, the molecule NAD+, an electron carrier, picks up electrons and hydrogen atoms from the carbon molecule, becoming NADH. Keep track of the electron carriers. They play an important role by transporting electrons to reactions in the mitochondria. In the final steps of glycolysis, some ATP is produced, but not much. For every glucose molecule, only 2 net ATPs are produced outside the mitochondrion. However, glycolysis has produced pyruvic acid, which still has a lot of energy available. Let's follow this pyruvic acid molecule into a mitochondrion to see where most of the energy is extracted. As the molecule enters the mitochondrion, 1 carbon is removed, forming carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Electrons are stripped, forming NADH. Coenzyme A attaches to the 2-carbon fragment, forming acetyl-CoA. Coenzyme A is removed, and the remaining 2-carbon skeleton is attached to an existing 4-carbon molecule that serves as the starting point for the citric acid cycle. The new 6-carbon chain is partially broken down, releasing carbon dioxide. Several electrons are captured by electron carriers, and more carbon dioxide is released. The carbon dioxide that you exhale comes from the reactions of cellular respiration. 2 ATPs are produced by the citric acid cycle for each molecule of glucose. At this point, only a small number of ATPs have been produced. However, more energy is available in the electrons that are being transported by electron carriers. While the citric acid cycle starts another round, let's follow an electron carrier to the next step in the process. Electron carriers such as NADH deliver their electrons to an electron transport chain embedded in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. The chain consists of a series of electron carriers, most of which are proteins that exist in large complexes. Electrons are transferred from one electron carrier to the next in the electron transport chain. Let's take a closer look at the path electrons take through the chain. As electrons move along each step of the chain, they give up a bit of energy. The oxygen you breathe pulls electrons from the transport chain, and water is formed as a byproduct. The energy released by electrons is used to pump hydrogen ions, the blue balls, across the inner membrane of the mitochondrion, creating an area of high hydrogen ion concentration. Hydrogen ions flow back across the membrane through a turbine. Much like water through a dam, the flow of hydrogen ions spins the turbine, which activates the production of ATP. These spinning turbines in your cells produce most of the ATP that is generated from the food you eat. The process you've just observed, cellular respiration, generates 10 million ATPs per second in just one cell. That ATP can power a biker up the trail, or it can power your brain cells as you learn challenging biology topics.
In your textbook, cellular respiration is divided into 4 main processes. The first one, as we watch in the video, is glycolysis. The second one is pyruvate oxidation. The third one is the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. And the last one is the oxidative phosphorylation. I don't want that you remember every single step. You will learn that in biochemistry. However, I want that you remember the order. That this one goes first, and then you go to pyruvate oxidation, then Krebs cycle, and finally you have this electron transport change. Another thing that I want that you remember is that the glycolysis is located outside of the mitochondria, while the other three processes are located in different regions of the mitochondria. Another thing that is very important is that I want that you see that the ATP production is very low, both glycolysis and in the citric acid cycle. However, in the last process, you have most of the ATP. So why we have glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, and Krebs cycle? Because you are producing a lot of NADH and ADH2. All these molecules, they're going to bring all this hydrogen here. That those ones will be the one that they will be in charge of producing the ATP. So I want you to think about a hydroelectric dam, and here, of course, you're accumulating a lot of water, and then you have such a strong pressure that you start producing energy. So, as I said before in previous classes, these hydroelectric dams, hydroelectric systems are a good tool to try to understand cellular process. And here, for example, these are a good tool to try to understand cellular respiration. In this class, we will talk about all the things that we talk about, redox reductions. It will be very useful to try to understand cellular respirations, because in the beginning, all this process, as we said before, they have the function of bringing these hydrogens, and due to redox reaction, we will separate the electrons and those of the hydrogens, and they will get together with the oxygen to form water. So then we have that one of the reaction is to reduce, while the protons will go here, and you have something called proton motive force. So these, you are here, you're storing a lot of energy, and through a process called, that we will talk more, chemiosmosis, cells will be able to move this protein, this rotor, and they were able to, through this exergonic reaction, turn the ADP and the inorganic phosphate into ATP. So again, this is just another redox reaction. Remember that one loses electrons while the other one gains electrons. The cellular respiration is also the same. Here you are going to have a gradient. You start going to accumulate things. Here you accumulate water. In the case of the cellular respiration, inside of the cell, you bring all these hydrogens from all these different process of the cellular respiration, and with that you create a redox reaction. In one section, the oxygen is going to produce water, and in the other case, you will have a protein that works like a rotor. There is the ATP synthase, and is going to produce ATP. So the ATP will come from this process. First thing that I told you is that during these three initial process, there is a lot of production of NADH and FADH. So this is the most important. You have all these molecules. So during those processes, most of the energy extracted from organic molecules is transferred to NADH and FADH. So these one are the ones that are in charge of creating the gradient here. And at the same time, they create very little ATPs, because the main function is to create this gradient that will later allow to reduce chemiosmosis, that are the ones that are going to produce most of the ATP. So just to remind you, we talk about the production of FADH, and that most of the ATP is coming from the last process. That is when you have the gradient and you have this chemiosmosis that we will talk in more detail in the following slides.